I still remember the first time she walked into the cafe. The door chime gave its usual polite ding, but somehow it felt louder that morning. Maybe because she didn't notice me at all. She brushed past the crowded entrance like she owned the air around her. Her perfume slicing through the smell of roasted beans and steamed milk. I was just the waiter behind the counter, half awake, holding a tray that had seen better days. She ordered a cappuccino, extra foam, no sugar. Without looking up, I could have been a talking blender for all she cared. Then she pulled out her phone, scrolled with the focus of someone saving lives. Her nail polish matched her phone case. That's the kind of detail my brain stores for no good reason. When I handed her the cup, our fingers almost touched. Almost, but she didn't flinch, didn't look up, didn't even pause. Just a polite thanks, like an auto-generated email. Then, as if the universe was bored, the cup slipped from her hand and crashed to the floor. Perfect cinematic slow motion, except I was the one holding the mop. I told her it was fine, that I'd clean it. She apologized quickly. One of those reflexive, sorry-s people throw like coins into fountains. Her friends laughed, the kind of laughter that makes the air colder. I smiled anyway, because that's the rule. Waiters smile. Funny thing, I wasn't even mad. Maybe because I'd already learned invisibility was part of the uniform. It's easier when no one expects you to exist beyond the table number. That night, when I washed the last cup, I caught my reflection in the stainless steel sink. Water ran over my hands, warm then cold, and I thought about her again, not because she was special, but because she didn't even see me. You know how certain moments stick, not because they're beautiful, but because they remind you of how small you are. That was mine. I walked home past dark shop windows, my apron still damp. The city was half asleep, neon signs flickering like they couldn't decide whether to live or die. I passed a billboard with some model smiling under fake sunlight, his jawline carved by Photoshop and good lighting. I remember thinking, how hard can that be? Standing still, pretending you're someone else. Then I laughed at myself, because really, who was I kidding? I couldn't even balance 3 coffee cups without a disaster soundtrack. Still, as ridiculous as it sounds, something about that thought wouldn't go away. Maybe the human mind's just cruelly optimistic. Or maybe it was because of her, not her beauty, but her blindness. She looked through me so cleanly it left a mark. The next morning, she came back. Same order, same seat, same phone, different lipstick. I pretended not to notice, because noticing is dangerous when you're nobody. But part of me was curious. What kind of life do you live when the world always looks back at you? Later, my coworker Luis elbowed me, whispering, "You've got a crush, man." I told him, "Crushes are for people with time and hair gel." He laughed, slapped my shoulder, and said, "You've got the tragic artist vibe. Girls love that." I told him I was more of a tragic dishwasher than an artist, but he didn't care. The thing is, he wasn't completely wrong. Every night, I'd sketch faces from memory, not hers specifically, but fragments of people I served. A tilted jawline, the tired eyes of a barista, the crooked smile of an accountant who always tipped well. Drawing made me feel like I could rearrange the world, maybe even be part of it. By the time I got home, the city was asleep, but my brain was noisy. I'd sit by the cracked window, sketchbook on my knees, and draw until dawn hinted through the blinds. That's when I noticed something odd in one of the sketches. I'd drawn her without realizing. Her head turned slightly, her lips caught mid-smile, a coffee cup intact this time. It wasn't perfect, but it felt alive. I closed the book fast, like I'd been caught. Then I told myself it meant nothing, just another face, another day. But deep down, I knew it wasn't nothing, because invisibility hurts less when you start imagining yourself seen. If you've ever worn an apron long enough, It starts to feel like armor, soft coffee-stained armor that smells faintly of milk and exhaustion. Mine had a pocket full of pens that never worked, a folded receipt with an unfinished dream scribbled on the back, and lint that no washing machine could kill. That was my uniform, invisibility, stitched tight. The cafe was small but busy, the kind of place where every table had a name. We had laptop guy, crying student, first date couple, and, of course, her table. I never learned her name. She didn't offer, and I didn't ask. Asking felt like stepping into sunlight when you've lived in shadow too long. I got good at the art of not existing. You wouldn't believe how many people can talk for hours without once looking up at the person serving them. They'd pour their heartbreak into phone calls, whisper secrets into their latte foam, plan million-dollar deals over burnt croissants, and I'd be right there, an accidental ghost. Some days I tried to play a game. How many seconds will it take before they acknowledge me? My personal record was for full minutes. That was a Tuesday, I think. Maybe Wednesday. Days blur when you serve time as much as you serve coffee, but invisibility has perks. You learn things. You hear things you shouldn't, like which influencer's boyfriend secretly works at his dad's company, or which couple's mutual break isn't all that mutual. Gossip dripped from those tables faster than espresso. I'd just nod, refill the water glasses, and pretend my earbuds were in. Luis called me the invisible wallflower. He meant it as a joke, but I wore it like a badge. There's a quiet power in being ignored. You get to observe everyone else's show without buying a ticket. Still, there were moments that stung, like when someone would drop a crumpled bill on the table without even looking, the kind of tip that says, "Here, now disappear." Or when a customer waved their card in my face as if I were a vending machine. Or when her table laughed with that same light, expensive sound, and my chest tightened for reasons I refused to name. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was saving for art school, that the sketchbook was my real life, and the cafe was just the waiting room. Except I wasn't saving fast enough, and the rent didn't care about metaphors. Once, after closing, I caught Luis counting his tips, muttering something about quitting soon to start a real life. "Where's that?" I asked. He grinned. "Anywhere with less caffeine and more air." I laughed. "So, nowhere near here." We clinked our cups like soldiers sharing a joke before battle. That night, I stayed behind to mop the floor. The cafe looked different after hours, quieter, softer, like it finally exhaled. The hanging lights cast halos over the empty chairs. I could almost imagine the place breathing, tired but peaceful. When I bent down to wipe under her table, I noticed something wedged between the floorboards, a business card, embossed gold letters on matte black. It smelled faintly of her perfume, jasmine and rain. I read the name. She worked at a magazine, the kind that printed glossy success stories of people who looked like they'd never spilled anything in their lives. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because it felt like proof that she existed outside the cafe, in a world with glass offices and white desks. I tucked it into my apron pocket, my invisible pocket, my invisible secret. That weekend, we got slammed with customers, tourists, students, freelancers, the usual cocktail of caffeine addicts. In the chaos, a woman complimented my latte art. "You should do something creative," she said, smiling. "I'm just a waiter," I replied automatically. She tilted her head. "No one's just anything." That line stuck to me like foam on a spoon. Later when I got home, I pulled out my sketchbook and drew the cafe from memory. But this time, I drew myself, too. Not as the waiter, as the observer, the one holding a brush instead of a tray. The lines felt shaky, unsure, but honest. Maybe invisibility wasn't a curse. Maybe it was camouflage, a temporary state before something else. At least, that's what I told myself. Because hope, like coffee, needs to be refilled daily before it burns out. The next morning, she came in again. Her order hadn't changed, but her expression had softer, maybe tired. When she finally looked up, for the first time in weeks, our eyes met. Just for a second, it was nothing. But to me, it was everything. And right there, between the smell of roasted beans and the hum of the espresso machine, something inside me whispered, "Wait, your time's coming." They always sat at the same table near the window, the one with the best light and the worst air conditioning. I called them the rich table, not because they threw money around, though they did, but because they carried themselves like gravity worked differently for them. The air bent slightly around their laughter. There were 5 of them: the loud one with the gold watch, the quiet one who typed during conversations, the designer with dramatic hand gestures, the laugher who documented everything on her phone, and her, the one who never saw me. They were a walking magazine spread, a little chaotic, perfectly framed. Their conversations sounded like LinkedIn posts come to life: branding, seed round, personal reinvention. Meanwhile, I was refilling their waters and wondering if I could reinvent the mop as a performance prop. Every time they came in, I played my part. "Good morning, everyone. Yes, almond milk, extra shot, no worries. I'll clean that." My voice became background music. And honestly, it didn't hurt as much anymore. I'd gotten used to my invisibility, like a screensaver no one turns off. But sometimes, she'd do something that pulled me out of autopilot, like tapping her pen against the table while thinking, or biting her lip when she read something funny. Small, human things that didn't fit the glossy image. It made her real, even if I wasn't allowed to exist in that reality. One afternoon, while serving them, I overheard the loud one say, "Imagine being stuck here forever, taking orders from strangers." I smiled politely, even though I wasn't part of the conversation. He continued, "I'd go insane. Some people just don't have ambition." And that's when she, without looking up, said softly, "Or maybe they're just tired." Everyone went quiet for a moment. Even I paused mid-pour. Then the loud one laughed it off, and the noise resumed. But that one line, it sat with me, like a note held too long. That night, I walked home slower. The city lights shimmered in puddles, blurring like watercolor. Maybe she didn't mean it the way I heard it. But still, she'd said something kind. Not to me, but near me. Close enough to matter. The cafe owner, Mr. Novak, was waiting for me when I clocked out. "Kid," he said, "you ever think of doing something else?" I shrugged. "All the time." He nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. "Then stop just thinking. The world's already full of waiters who dreamed too long." It was the first time anyone had told me to move. I went home that night and opened my sketchbook, only to realize I'd started drawing more people, fewer cups. My lines were changing before I even noticed. A week later, the rich table came again. She was wearing a blue blazer, hair tied back, phone buzzing endlessly. I was clearing plates when one of her friends asked, "So, how's the magazine cover project going?" She rolled her eyes. "Ugh. We're still hunting for a new face. The last one was forgettable." Her words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were casual. That effortless dismissal of someone's dream, the way the powerful swatted effort like a fly. "Still," I smiled. "Still," I said, "can I get you anything else?" She didn't look up. "Just coffee." I made that coffee with the kind of care you reserve for fragile art. Perfect foam, perfect pour, a little heart drawn on top. Ironic, really. When I served it, she didn't notice, but the designer did. "Wow," he said, "that's actually beautiful." "Practice," I replied. He looked at me properly then, like seeing a human for the first time. "You ever done art professionally?" I hesitated. "Not yet." He grinned. "Yet I like that." When they left, he dropped his card on the table. "If you ever need a portfolio review, call me." I stared at it for a long time. Then I slipped it into my apron pocket, right next to her business card. 2 names, 2 paths, both glimmering faintly like distant city lights. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining a version of myself who didn't serve coffee but created something worth serving. Maybe a painting, maybe a photo, maybe just a better version of me. Before I finally drifted off, I whispered into the dark, someday they'll look up. Tips were my form of applause. Each coin, each crumpled bill, tiny claps for surviving another day in the invisible orchestra of customer service. Some nights I'd empty my pockets and count them like prayer beads, whispering to myself, not much, but enough. Enough for rent, instant noodles, and the occasional sketchbook when the pages ran out. The funny part is, hope and milk froth rise the same way, slow, delicate, and easily ruined if you don't watch them carefully. I started saving my tips in a jar under my bed. I called it the escape fund, though I wasn't sure what I was escaping from yet. Maybe gravity, maybe mediocrity, maybe the smell of burnt espresso that clung to my dreams. Every time I added a few notes, I'd imagine what they might become. A class at the community art school, a used camera I saw in a pawn shop window, or maybe just one day off without guilt. Luis found out about the jar. Dude, that's cute, he said, but unless you're saving for a new mop, you're doomed. I told him I preferred the word investing. In what? He asked. In potential. He laughed so hard he dropped a stack of plates. But jokes aside, I meant it. Because every night when the cafe emptied, I'd stay a little longer, sketching at the counter, headphones in, the world on mute. The espresso machine hissed softly like it was breathing beside me. Sometimes, I'd draw her, not exactly her face, but the idea of her, someone unattainable, someone who didn't see me but somehow inspired me to see myself differently. That quiet, those after hours, were sacred. The dim light from the display case would spill across my sketches, giving everything a cinematic melancholy. The cafe felt like a church for the forgotten, the waiters, the cleaners, the dreamers who didn't clock out when the door locked. One night, while I was sketching, the sound of the front door startled me. "Hey," a voice said. It was the designer from the rich table. He smiled sheepishly, holding his phone. "Forgot my charger. Didn't think anyone was still here." I nodded, closing up. He spotted my sketchbook before I could hide it. "You draw, sometimes," I said, hoping he'd just take the charger and leave. But he didn't. He leaned closer, eyes widening. "This is actually good." I shrugged, pretending not to care, though my heart was performing a jazz solo. "Do you ever model?" he asked suddenly. "Model?" I laughed. "You mean like stand still and look expensive?" He chuckled. "Exactly. We're doing a concept shoot for New Faces. Raw, untrained, real people. No poses, no gloss. You'd fit perfectly." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "You're serious?" "Completely. Think of it as exposure." Ah, that word. The sacred currency of dreamers who can't afford rent. But still a tiny spark lit up inside me. Exposure wasn't cash, but it was possibility. He left his card again, this time on the counter, and said, "Call me if you're curious." For the rest of the night, I couldn't focus. The idea felt ridiculous, me, the guy who trips over mop handles, on a photo shoot. But it also felt possible, and that was dangerous. Hope always is. The next morning, I almost didn't show up for work. I stood in front of the mirror, debating with my reflection like 2 lawyers. "You're not built for that world," said one side. "But maybe that's the point," said the other. I ended up calling him. He sounded genuinely happy. "Perfect timing. We're shooting tomorrow. Bring yourself, that's all." The rest of the day, I was useless at the cafe. I spilled coffee, mixed up orders, and dropped a fork that echoed like a gunshot. Even she looked up at me once, eyebrows slightly raised, as if wondering what was wrong. I wanted to tell her, maybe I'm finally changing roles. That night, I counted my tip jar one last time. I had just enough to cover a bus ticket and a haircut. I whispered, "Goodbye, apron," even though I'd still need it tomorrow morning. For the first time, sleep came easy, as if my dreams finally had something new to rehearse. It started with a phone call that didn't sound real. "Hey, you still down for that test shoot?" The designer, whose name I finally learned was Theo, spoke casually, like we were just meeting for coffee, not for a potential rewrite of my existence. I said yes, though my voice cracked halfway through the word. He sent me the address, a converted warehouse by the river, a place where dreams and dust coexisted. When I got there, I almost turned back. The building looked intimidating, wide windows, white walls, and people who walked like they'd never tripped in their lives. But Theo spotted me instantly. "There you are," he said. "Relax. It's just light and a camera." I wanted to say, light can be cruel, but I smiled instead. The photographer was a woman named Mara, tall, calm, and observant in a way that made me feel like an interesting math problem. "First time?" she asked. I nodded. "Good," she said. "People who know what they're doing are boring. They didn't tell me to pose. They just asked me to stand by a window, hold a cup, ironically, a coffee cup, and look anywhere but the camera. I could do that. I'd been doing that my entire life." The light came through the window in soft stripes, slicing across my face and the steam rising from the cup. "Perfect," Mara said, snapping a few shots. Theo added, "Try not to look so tragic." "I'm not tragic," I said. "I'm just underpaid." They both laughed, and I relaxed a little. Something strange happened then. The more they photographed, the less I felt like I was pretending. The camera didn't treat me like furniture. It didn't ask for orders or change. It looked at me, really looked. After the session, Mara showed me a few shots on her screen. I didn't recognize myself at first, not because I looked better, but because I looked seen, like someone with a story, not a service role. "That's not bad," Theo said, tilting his head. "Actually, that's something." They thanked me, packed up, and said they'd be in touch. I went home feeling like I'd just committed a harmless crime, something secret and thrilling. The next few days at the cafe felt different. The espresso machine hissed the same, the tips were the same, but I wasn't. Even she noticed something. "You cut your hair," she said absent-mindedly one morning, eyes still on her phone. "Yeah," I replied, trying to look like someone else. She smiled slightly. "It suits you." It was small, but if you've been invisible long enough, even a flicker feels like fireworks. A week later, Theo texted me a link. "You're not going to believe this." It was the online gallery for the shoot, a small editorial feature titled, "The Beauty of the Unseen." And there I was, the waiter, the nobody caught mid-thought, staring out a window like a man auditioning for hope. It wasn't viral, not yet, but people started commenting. "Who's the guy? Something about his eyes. He looks like he knows something we don't." For the first time, strangers saw me without the apron, and I didn't hate what they saw. Luis nearly dropped his jaw when I showed him. "Dude, you look like a philosopher who sells perfume." "Is that a compliment?" "Absolutely," he said. "You're halfway to becoming someone's Pinterest board." I laughed, but something inside me stirred. Not vanity, exactly, more like recognition. I wasn't famous, but I was visible. The next time the rich table came in, something subtle shifted. Theo nodded at me when he saw me. The others followed his gaze. She looked up too, confused for half a second, like she'd seen my face before but couldn't place it. "Do I know you from somewhere?" she asked. I smiled. "I served coffee here." She frowned slightly, then laughed it off. "Right, of course." But her laugh sounded different this time, less effortless. more uncertain. That night, when I took off my apron, I felt lighter. Maybe it wasn't armor after all, maybe it was a cocoon. I didn't plan to go viral. Nobody ever does. It started as a ripple, a repost from an art blog, a few comments. Then someone tagged the photo, hashtag the waiter with the eyes. By the time I checked again, the ripple had become a tide. My phone lit up with notifications like it was finally excited to meet me. People were sharing the photo everywhere. It's the emotion. It's the quiet confidence. It's the guy who looks like he's seen too much espresso and not enough sunlight. That last one was painfully accurate. Theo called me 2 days later, voice buzzing through the line. Mara's shot blew up. We've had 3 agencies reach out, you free for a chat? I almost laughed. Define free. I still work shifts. Then we'll meet after you clock out, he said. Bring your face. That night, I sat across from him and 2 people who looked like they hadn't smiled since the 2008 financial crisis. They spoke in clipped sentences about branding potential and narrative marketability. I just nodded, pretending to understand. When they asked for my backstory, Theo grinned. He's a waiter. They ignored him. Now everyone's looking. The executives exchanged glances, the good kind. One of them whispered, "It's poetic, real," and just like that, I wasn't just a person anymore. I was a concept. Within a week, I had a photo shoot scheduled for a lifestyle feature. The studio was a blur of light stands, makeup brushes, and people who called each other darling while barely listening. They handed me clothes I couldn't afford and told me to just be natural, which is code for look effortless while surrounded by chaos. Mara was there again, adjusting the light. She smiled at me and said, "Remember the cafe? That's where your honesty lives." So I did. I imagined the clatter of cups, the hiss of steam, her table by the window, the one where invisibility had started to crack. The photos came out haunting. One of the assistants whispered, "He's got that underdog thing, like he doesn't belong here, and that's what makes it work." They used one of those shots for the online cover, my face, right there, under the headline, "The waiter they ignored." Luis nearly screamed when he saw it. "Bro, you're trending on Pinterest, LinkedIn, and some random French blog that only posts about sad men with cheekbones." "I'll take it," I said. Customers began to recognize me subtly at first. A few double takes, an extra smile. Some even asked for photos. "You look just like that guy online." "Yeah," I said. "He gets that a lot." But not everyone was amused. Mr. Novak squinted at me during my shift. "You planning to quit on me, superstar?" "Not yet," I said. "Fame doesn't pay bills until it starts lying," he chuckled. "Good, keep your apron handy, just in case the lights go out." And then one morning, poetic timing, really, she came back. Same table, same order. Only this time, she looked at me longer. "You're that guy," she said, voice careful. "Which guy?" "The one from the article." "Maybe," I said, wiping the counter. "Depends on the lighting." She smiled faintly, uncertain, like the world had shifted half an inch. I could tell she was trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the image she'd seen online. The invisible had acquired definition. When I served her coffee, she said softly, "You've changed." "Not really," I replied. "People just started noticing the same face." She looked like she wanted to say more, but her phone buzzed, and just like that, she was gone again. Only this time, I didn't feel invisible. That night, I walked home through a drizzle that turned the streets into mirrors. My reflection followed me, not the waiter version, but the man in the photo. The one who looked like he belonged somewhere else. When I got home, I checked the magazine's website again. The comments section was a mess. Strangers fighting over whether I was inspirational or overhyped. I didn't care for once. I existed enough to be disagreed with. And maybe that's the secret. You don't need everyone to love you. You just need the world to finally admit you're real. The first time I stepped onto a runway, I thought the lights would burn me alive. It wasn't nerves. Well, okay. It was nerves, but also AI. The air backstage buzzed with static energy, stylists shouting, zippers flying, perfume clouds thick enough to choke a philosophy major. People moved fast, like clockwork running on caffeine and insecurity. I was the new face. The real story. The waiter turned model. It sounded like a bad Netflix pitch, but apparently, authenticity was trending. Theo gave me a pat on the shoulder before the show. Just walk, don't smile, pretend you're bored of being this attractive. Perfect, I said. I've had years of pretending I don't care. He laughed, then whispered, that's the attitude. When I stepped onto the runway, the crowd blurred into soft, faceless light. Cameras flashed like lightning in a silent storm. The bass of the music vibrated through the floor, through my bones. I walked straight, slow, calm, each step measured like I'd practiced it forever. And maybe I had, just in a different way. I used to walk between tables, balancing cups instead of confidence. Now I carried nothing but myself, and somehow, that felt heavier. After the show, people I'd never met congratulated me. You have presence, you're the moment. You're so refreshingly unpolished. I wasn't sure whether that last one was praise or an apology. That night, at the after-party, everything shimmered. Sequins, champagne, laughter bouncing off marble floors. I stood near the back, sipping water, pretending to enjoy the chaos. Fame, it turns out, is loud. Theo joined me, grinning. You belong here, man. I looked around at the crowd, all those perfect angles, perfect smiles, perfect lies. Do I? He shrugged. You belong wherever people look at you. I wanted to believe him, but part of me missed the cafe, the hiss of milk foam, the way time slowed just before a customer said thank you. Visibility was addictive, but invisibility had been honest. A week later, my face was on an actual billboard, not just online. Right there above the same street I used to walk home on, still wearing my apron, dodging puddles. Luis took a selfie under it, sent it to me with the caption, "Bro, you're literally watching over us." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. The cafe felt different now. When I stopped by to grab coffee, yes, still the same one I used to serve, people turned their heads. A couple whispered, "Is that him?" Mr. Novak smirked. "Can I get your autograph? Or should I just raise your old wage posthumously?" "Keep the wage," I said. "The signature's worthless." He winked. "For now." Then one afternoon the door chimed again and she walked in. Not alone this time, a small entourage, camera crew in tow. She was filming a lifestyle segment for her magazine. She froze when she saw me behind the counter, not working, just chatting with Novak. Our eyes met. Her surprise was delicious, that flicker between recognition and disbelief. She approached, professional smile in place. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Same," I said. "Funny how stories loop back." She laughed softly. "We're doing a feature on urban success stories, self-made types, people who used to serve coffee," I interrupted, grinning. "Something like that," she admitted. There was no hostility, just an awkward tenderness. She seemed nervous. I asked if she wanted coffee, out of habit. She nodded. "Yes, extra foam, no sugar." "Old habits," I said, and she smiled, maybe remembering the day of the spilled cup. As I frothed the milk, I realized how far I'd come. Same order, same cup, same person, but everything else had changed. When I handed her the cup, our fingers brushed, this time intentionally. "Thank you," she said. Not an auto-response. A real one. I nodded. Anytime her crew started setting up nearby, She looked like she wanted to say more but got called away. As she turned, she glanced back, eyes soft, like she finally saw the person she'd once overlooked. And maybe, just maybe, that was better than any headline. That night, as I walked home past my billboard, I realized fame isn't about being seen. It's about who finally decides to look. Success has a strange echo. It sounds like applause at first, thrilling, validating, but after a while, it fades into a low hum that follows you everywhere. I started hearing it even in silence. The magazine cover came out that month. Urban Vogue. My name sprawled across the top like a confession from waiter to wonder, the face of new ambition. Theo called me at 6 a.m. because of course he did. "You're trending," he said between yawns. "Good trending or bad trending? The kind where people suddenly remember being rude to you." He wasn't wrong. My inbox was full of old acquaintances rediscovering their friendship. High school classmates who once thought I was too quiet now wanted to grab coffee. My ex-manager sent a LinkedIn request with a note that read, "Proud of how far you've come," as if she'd personally discovered me behind the dishwasher. Even Luis joked, "Bro, at this rate they'll name a latte after you." The strangest message came from her. Maya, the woman who once ordered without looking up, who now apparently wanted to feature my story in a deeper interview. I read her email 3 times. It was polite, careful, too measured to be guilt-free. Theo said, "Do it. Good press is good press." But I hesitated, because beneath her professionalism, I could still feel the faint tremor of the past. The imbalance of who once served and who was once served. Still, I agreed. Maybe closure needed its own headline. The interview took place in the same cafe, Poetic Justice. I guess cameras, crew, a makeup artist with the steady hands of a surgeon. I sat at a table that used to wobble under cheap saucers. Now, it held a glass of sparkling water and a microphone. She arrived late. Some habits die in sequence. "Traffic," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I used to tell customers that excuse didn't work for lukewarm coffee," I replied. Her laugh, genuine, surprised, cracked the surface of formality. The first few questions were predictable. Background, early struggles, what success meant to me. I answered smoothly, the way you do when you've told your story too many times. But then she leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Do you remember me from before? At this cafe?" I sipped my water, pretending to think. "I remember a lot of people. Some faces just took longer to notice me back." She blinked, not offended, but reflective. I deserved that. There was a pause. The crew adjusted lights, pretending not to listen. She said quietly, "I wasn't kind that day." I smiled. "You weren't unkind either. Just indifferent." "That's worse," she said, almost to herself. The interview went viral, not for my success story, but for the moment she looked at me like a mirror she didn't like. The comments section split in two, half praising my grace, half dissecting her guilt. I didn't enjoy the attention, but I didn't hate it either. It was just strange watching the internet try to define a story I'd already lived through. A week later, I got an invitation to a gala, the kind where names aren't written on paper. They're whispered into doors. Theo grinned when I showed him the envelope. "The big leagues, or the big egos?" I said. "Same thing." At the gala, chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks. I wore a suit tailored so precisely it made breathing feel optional. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and everyone smiled like their lives depended on being liked. Halfway through the night, Maya approached again. Alone this time. "You look different out here," she said. "I've been upgraded to main character energy," I said with a grin. She smiled. "You're still the same underneath, though, maybe," I said. "Or maybe the lighting just changed." We talked for a while about old jobs, Strange people, how fame feels both empty and full at once. There was no tension anymore, just the quiet rhythm of two people orbiting a shared past. When the music slowed, she asked, "Do you ever miss it? The cafe, the simplicity." "All the time," I said. "But I also remember how small the tips were." She laughed softly, eyes glinting like she was trying to memorize the version of me she hadn't met yet. At the end of the night, she said, "You know, you'd make a great cover again. This time I'll actually read the article." "Good," I said. I'd hate to waste another headline. As she walked away, I realized something quietly triumphant. I didn't need revenge anymore. Her acknowledgement, her seeing me, was enough. Still, a small part of me couldn't resist whispering under my breath, "Check, please." You'd think that, once your face is on magazine covers, everything after that becomes easy. Doors swing open, people remember your name. The universe finally hands over the VIP pass it's been hiding, but no one tells you what happens when the applause fades. The photo shoots continued, the interviews multiplied, and suddenly my calendar looked like a corporate spreadsheet with better lighting. Success, I realized, comes with meetings disguised as dreams. Theo and I were in a studio one afternoon, surrounded by racks of designer clothes that looked like they cost more than my old monthly rent. He tossed me a black jacket and said, "Put this on." He looked too grateful. I raised an eyebrow. "Gratitude isn't fashionable anymore. Not in this industry," he said. "You have to look like fame bored you 3 scandals ago." He wasn't wrong. The world loves a humble origin story but hates when you stay humble too long. Still, I tried to keep my feet on the ground, literally and metaphorically. I'd visit the cafe when things got loud, just to remind myself that silence had a flavor. Mr. Novak would wave a towel and shout, "The superstar returns." And Luis would hand me my coffee with exaggerated reverence, like I was royalty. One afternoon, I sat by the window, watching sunlight bend through the steam of my cup. Maya's magazine lay open on the counter, my cover issue, already replaced by another bright smile, another story. It didn't sting. Not really. It just felt like time exhaling. I'd started mentoring younger models, kids who still thought being recognized meant being known. One of them, Jordan, asked me, "Does it feel weird when they stop caring?" I said, "No, it feels like freedom. But it takes a while to see that." He nodded, not believing me yet. I didn't blame him. I hadn't believed it either. That evening, Theo and I went to a rooftop event, another celebration for another collaboration. The skyline shimmered beneath us, glass towers like lit-up promises. I leaned on the railing, watching the city blink. "Do you ever miss being invisible?" I asked. Theo smirked. "You mean before the selfies and sponsorships?" "Yeah, before people expected me to be someone all the time." He shrugged. "That's the cost of the dream." "Maybe," I said, "but sometimes I think the dream costs more than it's worth." He gave me a look, half amused, half concerned. "Don't go poetic on me now. You're the poster boy for resilience. Even posters peel eventually," I said. Later that night, when the music softened and the crowd thinned, I stepped aside for air. The city stretched below like an electronic heartbeat. And then I saw her again, Maya, across the terrace. Alone this time, holding a glass of champagne, gazing out at the skyline as if it might answer something for her. I approached, quietly. "We should stop meeting on rooftops. It's starting to feel symbolic." She turned, smiling faintly. I was just thinking the same thing. We stood there for a while, the kind of silence that's comfortable but charged. She said, "Your story's everywhere. People love it." "They love the headline," I corrected, "not the parts between." "Maybe," she said, "but it's the parts between that make it real." For a moment, I almost told her how strange it was that her indifference once broke me, and now her kindness made me cautious. But I didn't. Some truths work better unsaid, hanging in the air like perfume that lingers long after someone leaves. Instead, I said, "Thank you for noticing me, eventually." She smiled, a little sadly. "You were always visible. I was just looking the wrong way." We clinked glasses. The city lights trembled in the reflection. As she left, I realized I didn't need her to see me anymore. I was already whole, not because of fame or validation, but because I had finally stopped waiting for someone else's gaze to define my worth. That night, I walked home, no driver, no entourage, just me and the echo of my own footsteps. The same streets, the same air, but everything looked softer now. The billboards had changed, the lights still blinked, the city still didn't care who I was. And somehow, that was the most peaceful thing in the world. Success fades quietly, not like a storm retreating, but like a song ending mid-note. You almost don't notice until the silence feels heavier than before. Months passed. My contract with the brand expired. A new face took my place, younger, shinier, with the kind of hunger I used to mistake for destiny. And that was okay. I'd had my turn under the lights. Theo was already managing new talent, still calling me legend every time we talked. "You built the door," he'd say. "Now let them walk through it." He meant it as comfort, but it sounded like closure. I started traveling small towns, quieter corners. There's a strange freedom in anonymity, in walking through a market where no one knows your name, and the only thing that matters is whether the bread is still warm. I'd buy coffee from street carts, sip slowly, and think about the version of me that used to believe success was a finish line instead of a revolving door. Sometimes, strangers would recognize me anyway. "Aren't you that guy from the cover?" I'd smile and say, "I used to be." It wasn't sadness. It was release. One day I received a letter, an actual handwritten one, the kind that smells faintly of memory. It was from Maya. She was leaving the magazine, moving to another city. "You taught me something," she wrote. "That visibility isn't the same as connection. Thank you for reminding me." I folded the letter neatly and tucked it into the back of my notebook, not as proof of anything, but as a bookmark and a story that had finally found its ending. That evening I returned to the cafe. Mr. Novak was older, the tables shinier. Luis now managed the place. "Back to your roots," he teased. "Just checking if the espresso's still judgmental." We laughed. I sat at my old counter seat, the same view, same hum of conversation, same hiss of milk steaming. Time had moved, but some sounds refused to change. A young waiter passed by, nervous, awkward, spilling slightly as he served a cappuccino. I caught his eye, smiled, and said, "You'll get it." Eventually he smiled back, grateful in the way I once was, and for a second I saw the full circle, how every overlooked person carries an unfinished story, waiting for its light. As I left, the door chime sang softly. Outside, dusk folded the city into gold. My reflection lingered faintly in the cafe window, not the magazine version, not the runway one, just me, unfiltered, unposed, enough. And maybe that's what success really was. Not applause, not headlines, not being seen, but finally seeing yourself. I walked home slowly, hands in pockets, the scent of coffee trailing behind like a memory that had learned to forgive itself. The streetlights hummed, the air cooled, and the city exhaled, content to forget my name. And I was content to let it. If you're still awake, let it fade now. The lights, the noise, the faces that once made you feel small. Imagine them dissolving like evening fog over an empty street. Take a breath. Feel the weight in your shoulders loosen, the pulse in your temples slow. You've been the waiter, the ignored one, the dreamer holding a cracked cup, and you've either also been the person who made it through. In the soft rhythm of your breath, hear the cafe again, the gentle hiss of milk, The low murmur of people talking about nothing urgent. Somewhere a cup clinks against a saucer. Steady.com. Almost musical. The billboard lights dim. The camera shutters stop. What's left is quiet. The kind that doesn't ask you to perform. You don't need to be impressive here. You just need to be. The story has ended, but the heartbeat of it stays slow, steady, whispering that you are never invisible, even when the world forgot to look. Now, picture yourself sitting by that same cafe window. Outside, the city glows softly, not bright, not harsh, just enough to guide you home. The coffee in your hands is warm. Your reflection blurs into the glass, peaceful, complete. The waiter, the dreamer, the man on the magazine cover, all resting in one breath. Close your eyes, let it go. You're already seen, you're already enough. Sleep well.